Good afternoon. My name is Jeff Grunfeld, Chairman of the Speakers Program. Just a short announcement, there's going to be a Mayoral Candidates Forum March 7th in Royce Hall, and we hope that most of the candidates will appear, if not all of them. I'd like to introduce you first to Rosie Greer, who is an ex-Rams football player. He's an actor and entertainer. He was also very active in the Kennedy campaign, Senator Robert Kennedy's campaign in '68, and he in turn will introduce Tom Bradley. Mr. Rosie Greer.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be at UCLA campus, and I might add that I'm very happy to see so many faces, because seeing your faces make me know that you care enough to become involved, if not for one particular candidate, for another. And I think it's very important because as I look at you, I know that I'm seeing what democracy stands for and what it means to have individuals care enough to maybe use part of the lunch hour to come out and hear our next mayor speak. I was a long time personally becoming involved in politics because I felt that, one guy is just like the other. And until I had the opportunity to spend a lot of time with a man like Robert F. Kennedy. And after he was killed, I felt what a shame, what a terrible shame that this is what happens to a man who is sensitive to to people, who is sensitive to their needs. I went with Tom Bradley, our next mayor, through Watts last Sunday, and I saw a little girl, 5 years old, with rotten teeth, 5 years old. And I said, now, someone is responsible. Someone have to make a change. Someone have to be sensitive. Someone have to care enough to make sure that the people are informed, that they know that there can be help for a little girl that's 5 years old. So, I'm saying to you, the reason that I'm actively campaigning, actively being involved, is because we know that one person or one group of people can make a tremendous change. We should all join together and find that man who will stand out front and who will stand up and be seen, be visible, and reflect our attitudes and our beliefs to make the conditions better in which we live in. I know there's no need for a kid 5 years old to have rotten teeth. So I made a commitment to myself after Bobby Kennedy was killed. I felt lost for a long time, but then I said, if I really believed in the man, if I really believed in the principles, then I couldn't not do anything else. I had to keep going. And I couldn't carry all the things that he was carrying. I had to take those things that I could carry. And those things were, I can talk well enough. Maybe always my English is not right, but that doesn't matter. It's the feeling that I have for my fellow man. As I look at you, I realize, and I know that you and I are sisters and brothers, that you and I must live together. You and I must lift up our crosses and carry them regardless of what they are. We must try to right those wrongs. We must try to make your little sisters and your little brothers come into a world that's free from war, that's hopefully free from poverty, free from rotten teeth, but a world that's filled with love and understanding towards a fellow man. In order for this kind of world, I know it's a kind of dream of a utopia in a sense, but in order for these kind of things to take place, we need you. We need your help. We need your understanding. We need your verbal commitment as well as your physical to help to get this kind of leadership. You will be the leaders of tomorrow. You will make sure that we get the right kind of leaders in office today. So I'm here to introduce a man that doesn't really need that much of an introduction, because 95% of you, I'm sure, who know who Tom Bradley is. Tom Bradley ran last year, 4 years ago, for mayor, was leading all the way, and we found out what a racist campaign can do. We found out that people are easily swayed when you talk about this guy's black, this guy's brown, this guy's green. You see, I see a man who has no color, but a man who is concerned about not only your community, he's concerned about the whole state of California and concerned about our democratic principles. And so it is with great pleasure that I bring to you, with love and affection, the next mayor of the state of California, I said state because Los Angeles go a long ways in covering the whole state. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Tom Bradley.
Rosie will take you higher. That was beautiful. I've never been introduced that way. I don't think that any candidate could ask for more, could ask that the tone be set as it was by Rosie Greer. I'm going to speak rather briefly in opening remarks and then give you a chance to ask questions. Feel free to ask anything that's on your mind. I'll try to answer. Commenting about that ride through Watts last week, I think it highlights one of the problems in this city. It highlights that issue of whether or not one man can make a difference. And I think one man can. You can't do everything, but you can begin that process of change, that business of being the advocate, speaking out on the issues, talking about what concerns people, going to their communities to listen, to examine, and to try to find answers. Now, you can never find those answers if you're not willing to travel to those communities. And I think that pretty well highlights the whole service of Sam Yorty. And we've seen a lot of travel in the last several years by a lot of people. The President traveled to Russia and to China. Henry Kissinger traveled to Hanoi. And somebody asked Sam Yorty a few days ago why in the last 7 years he's not traveled to Watts. And he says, well, it's just a matter of policy. If Pan Am flew there, I'd go there. We've got to have a mayor who is willing not simply to fly to Hanoi or to some other part of the globe, to create sister cities all over the country and all over the world, but a leader who is willing to go to every nook and cranny of this city where we do have enormous problems, and to take a look at those problems and to provide the kind of listening ear and the kind of sensitive leadership that would begin to respond to those kinds of problems. I could go through the whole litany of the issues and the problems that are facing us in this city. They range all the way from environmental protection, to housing, transportation, consumer protection, and you and I know we need consumer protection today more than ever, with the prices of food rising so high that I don't know how we're going to be able to afford even hamburger in the next few months. A man who is concerned about the question of safety and security in our schools. We know that the learning atmosphere is destroyed by violence, and we can't tolerate it. We cannot have it. But someone who has positive answers, not just some sloganeering that is used in the course of a campaign. And I suppose that you would then come down to the question of what about the powers? And there are a variety of powers, and I'm going to talk about some of them in just a moment. I think that first of all, I'd like to just focus your attention upon what maybe is not yet a visible issue, but is going to be, and that's the whole question of electrical power, energy. And I suppose that if you've been reading lately, you have at least come across some material which indicates that we are beginning to face an energy crisis, not just in Los Angeles or Southern California, but throughout this country. I know of your interest in this kind of matter because it was right here on this campus that some of the student leadership first brought to my attention in City Hall the whole matter of the Four Corners issue, the polluting of the atmosphere, the devastation of the Indian lands, the taking of power from the states in the Southwest in order to provide the electrical energy right here in Los Angeles. We know that our Department of Water and Power was one of about 21 power agencies that was buying power there, with little concern for what effect it would have upon the people who lived there, little concern for the devastation of their lands or the pollution of their atmosphere. And after examining that issue, I introduced a motion in the City Council asking that we not approve that contract that Water and Power wanted to enter into to expand their operation there in Four Corners. And after bringing all this material to the attention of the Council, showing where the department had failed in many regards and how they were insensitive to the needs of the people in that area, the Council, by an 8-7 vote, shocked and surprised the Department of Water and Power because they refused to approve that new contract. That was a great victory, not just for us in Los Angeles, but I think as a matter of principle it was a great victory for this country, because to my knowledge it was the first time that any major power agency had been turned back, had been stopped in their greed, their desires to further expand their empires and to go wherever it was necessary. You know, we're now going all the way to Oregon and all the way into Arizona and New Mexico in order to bring power to serve our needs here, whether it be energizing our air conditioning units or our toothbrushes. But somewhere we have to stop that trend. The experts have said to us that in the next few years, by 1991, as a matter of fact, we will quadruple the amount of use of electrical energy right here in our community. And then by the year 2000, that increase will be another 70%. Imagine what is going to be necessary in order to meet those power needs. Can you imagine stretching all the way up and down the Pacific coast, power stations, new power generating stations about 8 miles apart? Well, it would take 130 new power plants in order to provide the needs by the year 2000 if these predictions come true. And if we continue in the course that we're now on, that's exactly what's going to happen. We cannot ignore this crisis. And that's one of the reasons I thought I'd just discuss it with you today, because I'd like to have you, just as you did a couple of years ago, get involved in saving us right here in our city, not just in the Four Corners area. Now, the mayor has ignored this crisis because he appoints the Water and Power Commissioners. He runs that agency that could have done something about it, that could have anticipated the problem, that could have called it to our attention and could have begun the process of of trying to take new directions. But the mayor claims, as he has so often, that he has no power. Well, let me just tell you that there is a power blackout right now in City Hall, and it's called Sam Yorty. We can no longer buy this story of his that he doesn't have power. The mayor has enormous powers. It's a question of whether or not he has the will to use them. He could have used those powers in connection with Four Corners. He could have used those powers in connection with the transportation problems, the fact that we've made no real progress in the last several years in that area. He could have used those powers in developing a more rational plan for this city, but he didn't. He could have used those powers to stop the oil drilling in the Pacific Palisades, but he didn't. The mayor has the authority to conduct hearings, to subpoena witnesses, to bring in these people and to expose them to the public spotlight, to articulate for all people the nature of the problems and to give some direction. That's the way in which an activist mayor ought to serve. That's the way in which Tom Bradley will serve. Let me quickly turn to just a few recommendations, and these are not meant to cover the field because there are quite a number. A few things that I think could be done by this city and by the mayor and the Department of Water and Power to begin now that process, first of all, of identifying the nature of this power crisis, and secondly, to do something about it. Examine, if you will, the practice of the Department of Water and Power, which for years has had an advertising budget of about $1 million a year. Now here is a monopoly. It has no competition. It's got all of the market to itself, and it spends $1 million a year on an advertising budget. What is worse is that $1 million in the year 1970-71 was spent primarily to promote further use of electrical energy. Now this in face of the threat of brownouts, in face of the threat of rolling blackouts, in face of the threat of the power crisis. And it doesn't make sense to me. That agency, in my judgment, ought to be in the forefront of that fight to develop the kind of research that will develop new power sources. We know something about solar energy. We know something about geothermal energy. And I think we've got to move faster on these kinds of research projects. And I see no effort on the part of our department to do that. We need to conserve some of our energy. We know now that we're wasting a great deal of energy in our practices, our building and safety programs that permit the development of some of the high-rise buildings that have no regard for how much energy they're going to have to use, that have no built-in provisions to minimize the nature of that use. The Department of Water and Power has not even set out for us a whole list of policy issues that would tell us what the threat is or what we can do about it. And I think that's a fundamental kind of direction that must be taken. I had to raise that issue, and I have asked them to do that. And that came out of that Four Corners issue. And even after months, we've had no answer from them. I think, for example, we could begin to require labeling of our major appliances. You know that some of our major appliances, our air conditioning units and some of the others, produce only at a 30% efficiency. Now that's some of them. And I think that we ought to expose them. I think that's in the interest of the consumer. And if we, by an act of the City Council, would require not only the labeling to show what the energy output is, what the efficiency rate is, I think we could then begin to get those shoddy kinds of businesses out of the city. We could begin to reduce the number of these appliances that they put on the market. And tomorrow morning I'm going to introduce a series of motions, and this will be included among them. And finally, I think we need a land use plan that would begin to say something about how many people can we tolerate in this city. Our present zoning plans would permit 10 million people here, and you and I know that's unthinkable. We could no more serve 10 million people in this city than you could walk on water. or maybe Sam Yorty can. But you and I know that we can't tolerate 10 million people. That's why I say that we need to begin now to set a limit, a reasonable, rational limit on the population in this city, and to develop a kind of plan that would disperse people, that would say what the density should be, and to say that, for example, that since the city can provide electricity and water and power for only a certain number of people, this has to be that limit. The only rational and legal way that I know is by setting that kind of growth policy, introducing that kind of plan. I did that 2 years ago. The planning department studied it for 2 years. They have now recommended such a plan and have established as the ultimate limit in this city 4 million people. I think it's up to us now to begin that planning process that would rezone, that would reduce densities, that would set that limit in terms of housing units. That's the way in which it can be done. That's the way I hope that it will be done. But the mayor ought to be taking the leadership in that effort. And yet here again, we've heard not a word from him. Perhaps he thinks that by showing his brochures with all of the lights on in the Department of Water and Power building, with all of the other skyline lit up at night, that somehow is a sign of progress. Well, I tell you, we're marching into disaster, and we cannot afford it. With the powers of the mayor, we can begin to make these kinds of changes with a leadership that is concerned, that is willing to talk, to listen, and to examine, to use all of the resources, whether they be the university research labs or private research labs. I think we can begin to get a handle on this and many other problems. That's the way in which I think that office ought to be used. And I tell you now, unless we begin that process soon, all of us, you and I, are going to be in trouble in the years to come. I'll take your questions. I understand there are 2 roving mics here. If you'll raise your hand, yes, question over here.
I would like to yield the floor to Olga Rodriguez, who's another candidate for mayor.
Well, I think that Olga Rodriguez, does she have a question or does she have a speech? Yes.
Today, 300 National Guard were sent to a small city in South Dakota to quell a rebellion of 300 Native Americans who've taken over that city. Carl Stokes sent in the National Guard to quell a rebellion of blacks in that city when he was mayor of Cleveland. I would like to know what you would do were there such a rebellion in this city. I'd like to point out that in 1968 you stated, when a riot occurs, the only way to deal with it is to move in immediately with the police and with whatever force may be necessary. I agree, Mr. Bradley, the issue...
Ms. Rodriguez, you're talking about some other candidate. I have never made any such statement in my life. And I...
1968 during a high school strike you made that statement.
No. You're mistaken. In direct answer to your question about what would be done about a rebellion, I don't anticipate any rebellions under the administration of Tom Bradley. I think if you have the kind of sensitive leadership, if you have the kind of atmosphere in the city that deals with people's problems, you don't have that kind of unrest, you don't have that kind of frustration and anger. And that's the way I think you deal with it, in a positive fashion, not having to respond to some kind of an uprising. Yes. All right. Let me try to capsule that question and respond to it. Her comment was that 4 years ago we suffered a bitter defeat. And she says that she is sure that I felt some sense of bitterness, but it could not match that which was felt by many people who supported me. I want to tell you I was sadly disappointed. I was really hurt by it. But that's not the first time that I've been turned back on an effort that I've made, and I determined the day after that election I was going to do it again. I was going to correct the mistakes that we made, and we made some. I was going to show the people of this city that Tom Bradley, the man, was the kind of individual who was independent, who would respond to the problems of all of the people, would serve them all fairly, justly, and well, and to get across that message so that the smear campaign that was tried last time simply will not work again. So I've not looked in bitterness at what happened before. I've simply looked in a positive way at the future. That's the way I approach this campaign. And I'm confident that a significant difference is present this year as opposed to 1969. For example, I was known by only 7% of the people when that campaign started. That's the reason that kind of smear and fright campaign could work. They said, well, what if the Black Panthers take over? What if City Hall falls down? You know, what if all of these things should happen? Or what if any of them should happen? We don't really know Tom Bradley. What if? The fact that they now know Tom Bradley, and 95% of the people in this city say they do know him, I think that's going to make a difference. I think the fact that we've got the 18 to 20-year-old vote that would have been responsive to Tom Bradley last time, and had they been eligible to vote, I would have won that election. That's going to make a difference. We will have others who moved up from that level to the now over 21. Beyond that, you know, I've worked in every section of the city in the last 4 years. I haven't spent a day where I put in less than 12 hours working with people in their communities on their problems, because I wanted them to know something about this guy. Man who never asked for any favors, never asked for any special consideration, but who was willing to fight for everything he ever got. That's how I've been able to achieve whatever I have. And I tell you now that I believe that the mood is different. I believe that it is possible that the people of this city are going to take a look this time at what kind of background, what kind of experience, what kind of qualifications do the candidates have. And if they do, Tom Bradley stands head and shoulders above the rest. I think they're going to be able to look beyond the factor of race. And if they do, Tom Bradley is going to be elected. And I'm confident, on the basis of some 8 polls that have been conducted so far, which show consistently that Tom Bradley is leading the pack with a significant margin, I'm confident of victory this time. And I just ask you to have as much faith as I do in the people of this city, and let us try this one more time. You know, I believe in giving people a chance, and I'm prepared to give them another chance in this city. Who's next? Yes.
Okay, wait. You spoke a few minutes ago. Supports a 100% tax on polluters, which will be used to finance a rapid transit district. Now, where do you stand on this?
Well, I have a different plan for rapid transit, and let me explain it to you. In 1968, the Rapid Transit District had a bond issue on the ballot, and it failed. In January 1971, Tom Bradley introduced a motion in the council calling upon that agency to report, what are your plans, what have you done since 1968 to promote a rapid transit program? And they had done nothing. It took a year to do 2 things. One, to pass a bill to identify the money that would be available. Secondly, to get that agency finally to report on what their plans were, and they really were not much in the way of change. It was through my motion then that our city set aside the $4.5 million a year that we will get from the sales tax on gasoline. We got a commitment from the county to do the same thing with their $1.5 million. The RTD to set aside $10 million of their $42 million a year they're going to get. That money is going to be the matching basis here in this community to go to Washington, D.C. to get Department of Transportation money. They promised it. It will be forthcoming. With that amount of money, we can actually begin construction of the rapid transit system in greater Los Angeles. Now, it's true it will be only the first leg, but I think you have to begin somewhere, and I'm prepared to start, and I think we can in 1974. In addition to that, we're already fighting to break loose some of that money that is now being hoarded for freeways and other road networks in the country. The Highway Trust Fund in the state of California and in Washington. And I think that eventually we're going to break that fund. But here is a way in which we can begin now without any talk about any grandiose plans, without any talk of something which we might all like, but is highly unlikely of passing 100% tax on polluters. That's a noble notion. But I think we got to be realistic, and my plan, I think, is a realistic beginning on the rapid transit system. Yes.
I know that you're very interested in environmental issues. You've helped out a lot in Santa Monica Mountains. You helped get the City Council to endorse Proposition 20. I would like to know how you stand on a couple issues before the City Council. One is the scenic parkway on Mulholland Drive.
I'm in favor of it.
The two-lane. Okay. The other one is the Venice Bikeway of Marvin Brady.
Well, there is a proposal for a Venice Bikeway, which is under discussion, and we have given some time for them to develop what I think is a compromise to the proposal which was coming out of the Department of Recreation and Parks. I'm all in favor of a bikeway down there, but I don't favor building that concrete strip across that expanse of sand down there, and we're trying to find a way of avoiding that. I support the bikeways throughout this city, and I will support one that is going to be rational and reasonable down at the Venice area as well.
There's one problem that comes up here is I believe Pat Russell is supporting a plan that would put in the alternate bikeway, but this would be along the Bologna Creek or lagoon, and there's a problem here of environmental impact.
Well, I think that, if I may cut you off, I think that it is premature to talk about exactly what plan is going to be discussed or approved, because the purpose of that 90-day extension of time was to give them an opportunity to work out the differences that now exist between the one plan that Mrs. Russell offered and the other plan that was coming out of the committee. And I think that within 90 days we'll have a chance to resolve that issue and find a way to get a bikeway. Yes, a question back here.
In spite of your efforts, the AFL-CIO Central Committee has endorsed Mr. Unruh. Your efforts not to have them do this. Do you think, first, it's because of your active and, as I feel, good support of Senator McGovern that this happened? And do you think this will hurt you with the labor movement? I know some unions stayed uncommitted, but do you think it will have any effect?
The answer to both those questions is no, and let me just elaborate a little bit. Jess had been claiming for almost a year that he had unanimous support of organized labor, and that is not so. There have been many unions that United Auto Workers, Steel Workers, the Amalgamated Clothing Workers, a whole host of unions that simply refused. They felt, as I did, that they should not divide labor in the course of this primary, that they should save their power and their influence when it could really count. I think that what is most significant is the fact that, among the rank and file working men and women of this city, they line up just as the rest of the city did. In every poll that we've seen, and the most recent one showed, for example, that Jess Unruh got 15.4% of the rank and file vote. Tom Bradley got 37%. And if you look at all of the polls, I think that's exactly the way it's going to come out. He'll be fourth, Tom Bradley will be first. And I think the endorsement by Coke, which is only a segment of labor, is not going to have any significant impact on the outcome of this election. Question over here.
You've listed a not complete, but a frightening list of problems. In the new book entitled Common Sense 2, the author provides solutions to those problems by two simple laws. They being that there's established by law a maximum allowable personal wealth limit and a governmentally guaranteed income for every citizen of the country, with both limits democratically set. Two questions. First, have you read the book, Common Sense 2? And second, what is your opinion on those two particular proposals and how effective they would be in solving the problems that you listed?
The answer is no, I have not read that book, but I think that to suggest that there's some simplistic answer to the complex problems of the 1970s is really, flying in the face of fact. I just don't think
those weren't simplistic suggestions. They were very serious fundamental changes from the present economic system in this country. Namely, that there be established a governmentally guaranteed income for every citizen of the country, and that limit democratically set. My question is, would you be for or against that?
Let me just say that I have supported a number of efforts to provide for a movement in the direction of what is called some kind of uniform level of support for people. I think the welfare reform bill, which was far inadequate, was a step in that direction, and it failed. I think we've got to move to in that direction if we're going to begin to solve part of the economic problem. But that's not enough. You know, there's so many problems that go far beyond the question of dollars that I say you can't suggest that as the answer, the sole answer, because I think it is too simplistic.
That's a fundamental solution.
It may be fundamental to the economic problems, but it is not fundamental to the whole host of other problems. That's what I'm trying to say to you, the gentleman in the jacket.
Tom Bradley, I think I'm only 25 years old, and all I know is Tom Bradley, the black man running for mayor. But it's things that I like to ask you, in the sense of you've seen how Nixon, through his budget cuts, have deteriorated the moral fiber of the country. Through conventional politics. It's the same thing with Reagan. And I was just wondering, I think it's a lot of things, the same things run into the minds of a lot of students here on the fact of what is the effect of conventional politics. Now, when you get to the heart of the matter, I mean, you go into, as you talked of Watts and as they talked of militants and all that kind of stuff, I was wondering if, have you deeply took consideration of the fact of dope running through the black community, gangs in the black community, the fact that the black community Watts is still the same way it is, and it looks like it's going to be the same way in the future. And when you raise your head and say, well, Tom Bradley comes to UCLA and makes a political speech, I would wonder, do you really feel that you can change the moral fiber of, should I say, Mayor Yardy, or should I say Los Angeles, the city of Los Angeles? Do you really feel that you can change the moral fiber of City Hall?
Well, don't ask me to do the impossible. I can't change St. Mayorty. But I think I can begin the change of attitude, the change of direction for this city. If I didn't believe that, I wouldn't run. I don't run for this office for some kind of glory or prestige. I don't run just because of some title. I run because I'm firmly convinced that Tom Bradley not only knows something about the nature of these problems. I lived in Watts. I know something about the nature of poverty. I know something about deprivation, social and economic and the rest of it. And I know what people feel who've lived under those kinds of conditions. And I believe that I have not only the sensitivity to understand those problems, but the commitment to do something about them. If you talk about politics, if you talk about traditional politics, I reject that totally and completely. And I think that's one of our problems today. Too many politicians have been expedient. Too many have been willing to sell out their principles. Too many have been willing to tell you something over here and to say something to somebody else over there just because it will please their ears. I've never done it, and I never will. I believe, yes, that I can begin to change things in this city. Now, I'm not going to suggest to you I'll solve all of the problems.
Mr. Bradley,
but I think we can start.
Could you go over this?
There was a question over here.
How about this side of the room? Can I go ahead? I wanted to ask you, with regard to the recent administration moves in the OEO area, the president seems to be setting a trend for relying a great deal on local cities to, quote, pick up the ball. First of all, what's the status now of revenue sharing as far as Los Angeles is concerned? And do you view that as being able to take up some of that slack?
Well, the revenue sharing, which has been passed by Congress, provides about $5 billion a year. The city of Los Angeles gets about $35 million a year. And I must tell you that's totally inadequate to deal with the problems. You know, the president's impoundment of funds and the cutback on funds would far outstrip the money we're going to get through this revenue sharing. And I think it would be the major catastrophe of the 20th century as far as local government is concerned if his plan goes through as he has proposed it. And I have fought it. I have called upon my colleagues who are the mayors and councilmen all over this country to bend every effort to prevent it from happening. We're calling on Congress. I'm going to Washington this weekend to talk again with the mayors and councilmen throughout the country, see what we can do to mount a united effort against it. I have an appointment in the White House next Sunday to talk with the President's Domestic Council about that very issue. I'm not sure we can convince the President, but we're going to do everything we can, because one of the things I want to do is just show the impact on our city. 25,000 young people who either had employment or recreation last summer are now going to have it this year because of the cutbacks in the President's budget. The city will lose some 11,000 jobs. The Board of Education alone, 10,000 jobs. And I tell you, you repeat that over and over again. When you multiply all of those, you will have a catastrophic effect upon this country. That's the reason that I oppose it. That's the reason I think that it would be a disaster if it should go through as it is proposed. Okay.
Can we take one more question?
All right. I understand we take one more question.
I hear that you're an advocate of the evangelic movement Key 73. I was wondering if that's true or not. If you could explain.
Key 73, I might explain for some, is a religious effort on the part of the Protestant and Catholic churches in this country. I served for a time as a lay co-chairman in Southern California. The effort of Key 73 was designed to bring to the church those who were either had strayed from the church or were not committed. It was not designed to be a proselytizing effort to convert people from their own faith. That has been made clear over and over again by the leadership in Key 73 and concurred in by a number of people in the Jewish faith. But there was a parallel effort by a number of organizations not at all connected with Key 73. In some cases they tried to infer that they were, but they were not a part of Key 73. They were heavily proselytizing, especially on the college campuses and high school campuses among young people of Jewish faith. And I reject that, and I spoke out against it as I have for all of my life. And because some were attempting to make this a matter of a political issue in the campaign, I thought it better that I get out of that movement, and I did resign. And my efforts now are to try to bring together instead of divide people. And I think that we must do all that we can to preserve the integrity of the individual's right to choose his own course of religious faith, not to have anybody try to proselytize you. We'll take... I understand.
I was here late. I want to apologize, but for those who are 18 or over, I'd like to have someone here explain if they haven't registered to vote, regardless of their choice, where on campus they may register, and for those who are under 18, how they may help in registering. Those are my two questions. I'd like to make one final remark. I'm undecided on who I'm going to vote for. I just represent one vote. When I decide, I hope to persuade a lot of people. And as far as I can see right now, I know who we shouldn't vote for. You brought out one man who I think might make a better news commentator than Mr. Redden did. But Mr. Redden has $25,000, I believe, retirement, and I've got it narrowed down in my mind between you and another politician, and I'd like to know right now how I can personally help you, either pass out pamphlets, whatever we can do.
All right, thank you. Let me just expand upon that question a little bit, because I think you need to understand the difference between Tom Bradley and some other candidates who may be running. I have more experience in this city government than anybody else who is running, with the possible exception of Sam Yorty. And, and I think we can pretty well discount his 12 years in office. And I think it's a question of knowing something about this city and about city government. I have been elected as president of every association of city officials over this country, in Los Angeles County, the state of California, Southern California, 2 presidencies at the national level. That, I think, tells you something about the leadership skills and the qualifications and the ability of Tom Bradley. I want to provide this city with that same kind of leadership, and I would just suggest to you that we need to look for those who know this city, understands how it works. You need to look for somebody who is not going to be an expedient politician, someone who is not going to be the traditional kind of wheeler and dealer. I'm not going to be making deals behind closed doors, because I'll tell you this, that if it is done, and some people brag that that's the way they operate, they're going to read you out or write you out of the program altogether. That has been the pattern of the past, and I think we've had enough of that. Thank you very much.
Bradley? Thank you.